I came across this big 500-pound piece of log, which just to get it home in my car, I had to quarter it. And I did that with a chainsaw and splitting it. But to put those pieces on my bandsaw, I still need to cut them in half, and ideally I'd like to make a very straight chainsaw cut. Now, chainsaws are designed to primarily cut across a log like this. In that configuration, the teeth are always cutting side grain, and that works reasonably well. But if you want to mill a log into lumber, you're cutting like this, and that means you're always cutting straight into end grain. And in this configuration, it's really hard to get any sort of chips out at all. But the direction that is easiest to get chips out is along the grain, like this. So if the bar of the chainsaw was parallel to the grain like this, that would work really well, but I can't reach the whole log like this. So I figured the next best approximation would be to cut at a really shallow angle like this, and then gradually work in steeper until I'm cutting all the way through the log. My first thought was to just run the bar of the chainsaw along a 2x4, but the chain actually cuts a bit wider than the bar, so I just end up cutting into the 2x4. So my next thought was to run the chainsaw along this part here, but it turns out this is not entirely parallel to the bar of the chainsaw. So what I've come up with is I managed to barely drill a couple of holes in the bar, and I made this guide that I can bolt to the bar, and that's parallel, and I'll use that along the 2x4 to guide the chainsaw for the first few cuts. So I have my guide 2x4 attached to a log, and let's see if this actually works. Wow, that went way faster than I imagined, especially for the first bit of the cut. Though here, this is pretty messy. Hopefully with practice I'll get that smoother. That's getting better already. The cut I made from the other end, that was a mistake. I got that misaligned. And I think what's happening is sometimes the channel gets so plugged up with sawdust, I just need to sweep through it from time to time, because otherwise I'm cutting through the sawdust and I don't necessarily cut it where it was. So smooth, all I need is some 220 grit sandpaper and it's done. At just 2.5 minutes per cut, it would be tempting to finish and cut this up into boards, but the chainsaw kerf was just too wide and I'd be wasting a lot of lumber. The cool thing about some of these shavings, they're long and straight like this, and those are excellent for starting fires in a wood stove. Then it was time to take those heavy blocks inside, and first I get a nice square edge on it, and then I start cutting some boards on it. But I ran into a problem here, it just wouldn't go. And the first thing I did is check the belt tension and tension it up a little bit to get a bit more power. But the blade just wouldn't go any further, and when that happens, there's only one thing to do, and that is to back it out, which was difficult because the kerf was full of shavings, and then sharpen the blade. So it's taking out the blade here. I'm using my usual sharpening method with a Dremel. It looks like I'm just rubbing along the teeth, but I'm actually touching every individual tooth. And to sharpen the entire blade took about 3.5 minutes. This is playing at 16 times speed. Man, what a difference a sharpened blade makes. I'm just cutting so much faster now. Some slight waviness in my previous cut, so I'm just going over the jointer a couple of times to straighten it, and then cutting more boards off of this chunk of log. Last cut is just to flatten that rough edge a little bit so the wood will stack better. I started every one of those blocks by squaring it up on the jointer so I'd have a good reference edge, but man, I never thought I'd put 60-pound pieces of wood on that jointer, but it stood up to the abuse. Handling all that heavy lumber and pushing it across the bandsaw sure was a good workout for the arms. In fact, I was starting to feel a tingle in my arms, which is a good signal that says I should really stop. Having thoroughly tired out my arms from all this bandsawing, I just didn't want to carry the last 2 blocks down into the basement, so I split them apart by cutting from both sides with a skill saw. And that cut just barely deep enough that I could get them apart. And those square sections, I'll let them dry and then I can just resaw them into whatever I need later. And here's all the lumber from that log. It's going to take a while to dry and even longer to use it up.